This is Jeffrey Jones, also known as Triple J, coming to you with the Community Podcast. What we say community is only common unity. That is the tie between you and I. The tie for all, the tie that binds us, the tie that makes us, the tie that makes us whole. Thank you for being here with us for this common unity. Hello, audience, and welcome once again to the Common Unity Podcast. We are here, and we're glad that you are here with us. We know that you could be doing anything, anywhere, at any time, but you have chose to spend this time with us, and we greatly appreciate you being here with us. Once again, I have a gentleman here today who has great knowledge about what we're about to talk about, and I'd like for him to introduce himself to you.
Hey guys, once again, this is Vaughn Frazier. I am the producer of this podcast. I also am a public speaker, a rapper, singer, extraordinaire. I wear many hats, including this one. So just happy to be here today with Mr. Jones. He's been a blessing, and just looking to talk more and have a good time.
Well, today we get to talk about someone who I've really had a chance to see grow, and he really put an imprint, I think, on society that holds true to this day. I hate we lost him at such an early age, but Tupac Shakur was not only one of the best artists of all time, actor, singing, but he was a great person. When you look at his heart and his soul and the things that he was trying to do. And I want to dig a little deeper underneath the surface so people can really understand who he was. Tell me, what do you think about Tupac in his early days?
Yeah, so I watched Dear Mama. If you guys haven't seen it, it's on Hulu. It's a 5-part, I believe it's 5 parts,
yes,
on a documentary on Hulu by Alan Hughes and Quincy Jones III, Quincy Jones' son. He produced it as well. I think he executive produced it, but it's an amazing documentary, right? So yeah, Tupac, his early days, I learned a lot in that documentary. I knew about his mother. I knew about his mom being a Black Panther. I knew about certain things. I didn't know the depth. I didn't know the mentorship of Panthers around him, from Mutulu Shakur and Geronimo Pratt being his godfather, and so many other names that were in, and even Billy Garland, which I knew was his, I believe that's his name. I knew that was his biological father. I didn't know he was in the Panthers, are involved. So, I learned a lot, man. It just gave me more of an appreciation for who the Panthers were. And I know there's a big misconception even to this day, even though we have, you could search out a lot of things and find out the truth, but there's still such a misconception about the Panthers today. And just knowing that he came from that, people will say a radical background, but it really is just a Black organization that loved the Black community, that was trying to do right, not perfect, because none of us are, but trying to do the right thing, and was sick of police brutality and wanted to prepare our people to be able to defend themselves, because what the saying is, better be judged by 12 than carried by 6, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of these people were in fight or flight mode. They just wanted to survive. And so knowing that he came from that background, to seeing his music and a lot of the songs that we still remember and sing today, was an amazing thing, from that Panther background.
I agree wholeheartedly. And one of the things that I think you would find interesting, if you took just say 20, 25 minutes and do some research, Google some things about the Panthers, and you might be truly surprised. A lot of folks, as Vaughn stated, they thought that the Panthers were this radical organization that was out to destroy the government and just totally lawless. They were none of that. They were a grassroots movement, grew out of Oakland and spread across the country. And the first things that you see them doing are they're feeding hungry people in the neighborhood. That's one of the first things I saw. How can a kid go to school and perform when he or she is hungry? That doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And what they did was they organized and said, hey, let's feed all these kids breakfast before they go to
school. This was before the system that we have now where, you can get breakfast in school.
Right.
And that's what they started all that. And you look at healthcare. They had mobile healthcare units that would go throughout the poor neighborhoods and help folks who didn't have the money or insurance and couldn't get healthcare. That was another thing they did. They had a 10-point program. Look at that 10-point program. I would say out of the 10 points, there's maybe only 2 that were not doable. The other 8, totally doable, and they would have really enhanced the lives of those people in the community. That 10-point program is a beast. I wish they had been allowed to implement that, and you'd see lives would be so much better today behind that. But once again, they were not. I look at the discipline of it. In neighborhoods where you have despair and you have poor people, one of the things you see a lot of is violence. You unfortunately see a lot of violence. But one of the things that happened, one of the byproducts that I don't think people foresaw was that in the neighborhoods where the Panthers were present in large numbers, the violence went down. The crime went down. And it was mainly due to the fact that they wanted to make people respect themselves and respect each other. And they showed them a way to do it. And that's a great thing when you think about it. Self-esteem is a great tool to use in building people. And they did that. I say, to me, that was one of the most effective organizations for its time that was out. And it was so effective that the government, spurred by J. Edgar Hoover, decided we can't let this happen. We've got to destroy these people. And that's what they did.
Right. Fred Hampton, perfect example.
Yeah, they initially wanted the point, they have a program, COINTELPRO. And you can look at Google COINTELPRO. You might be surprised at some of the things the government was doing. And they still do. So when you look at COINTELPRO, the aim was to discredit any leaders in the Black community who might be able to improve the lives of those people in those communities. Think about that. Discredit those people. And if we can't discredit them, guess what? That's what happened to Martin Luther King. That's what happened to Malcolm X. That's what happened to Fred Hampton of the Black Panthers. You murder them. And it was so graphic in the way that they were able to do it and get away with it, that it brings me back to things like we saw in the movie.
Do you remember where you were doing when Fred Hampton, when you heard the news about Fred Hampton?
I was a young fella at that time when Fred died, and I had heard about him. And information wasn't as easy to obtain then as it is now. There was no internet, there was no Google. And when you ask people in the elementary schools and the middle schools back then about someone like Fred Hampton, you weren't going to get the right answers. You know what I mean? You weren't going to get the right answers.
Right.
So it was something that I heard about through older guys, old heads in the community, and they were upset. I was playing basketball, they were upset. And as I'm leaving the basketball court, I'm wondering why all old heads in such an uproar today. Normally they're the coolest people around.
Right.
And I stopped and started listening to the conversation. And I was like, man, this Fred must have been a heck of a dude the way they talking about him, which made me curious. And then I started to, question different folks who I knew that I respected. And that's how I found out what he was all about. And the man was 21 years old when they murdered him. And at the same time, at just 21 years of age, he was doing things in Chicago that were unreal. This man had virtually stopped the gang violence. And anybody who knows about Chicago, Chicago has always had a gang problem. He had pretty much stopped the gang violence. He was getting people of all races to unite in an effort to clean the city up, get rid of corruption, and let some of that money that was being stolen go towards the people in the communities. And that's one of the things that will get you killed as a minority every time. Once you start interfering with that cash flow, that's a very dangerous thing. It's a very dangerous thing, and I know Fred knew it. I know Dr. Martin Luther King knew it. I know Malcolm X knew it, and that's one of the reasons why I just have to respect the bravery of all those men who knew that their lives were on the line as they were trying to make things better for other people.
In a time where it was even easier to kill blacks and get away, or to discriminate, to do whatever you wanted to. It wasn't a cancel culture. It wasn't a thing where you could fear, you know, the likelihood of you fearing any type of punishment. It was a lot less likely back then than it is now. And even now it's hard, but back then it was even more. Man, we can get away with almost anything.
And that's a fact. I mean, you look at what happened to Fred. The man's in his apartment, in his bed, he's asleep. Cops kick the door in the middle of the night, and they fire over 100 rounds into that house. So they were trying to kill everybody in there. And they labeled it as a shootout. That's what they labeled it as. But when they did the forensics, it came out that there was only one round fired in that house that didn't come from a police weapon. Out of hundreds of rounds, there was one that didn't come from a police weapon. They utterly surprised the people in that house, so they really never had a chance to defend themselves. And they shot Fred Hampton as he slept. Shot the man dead in his own bed. So, you know, this lack of accountability is so much stronger then than it is now. You're right. It's so much stronger than it is now, but it's still prevalent.
And I can imagine, you know, Tupac being raised and having that knowledge. Imagine, you know, not only hearing about it like you did from the OGs in the neighborhood, but also, you know, him actually coming up in that he wasn't just hearing about, you know, some Panther from other guys. He was hearing it from Panthers. He was seeing it. He was hearing it from his mom and different things like that. He was brought up in that. So that militant mindset, that just leadership mentality that he had, an ability to communicate and care about, because that's ultimately what the Panthers did. You know, they cared about our community, right? And you see that in Pac and a lot of his songs. He's talking about, we got to eat better, we got to love each other, we got to do different things. And you saw that side of Pac that was the revolutionary, you know, like a Fred Hampton, you know, like a Bobby Seale, like, you know, some of these guys. And you know, early in his career, you know, you see that, you know, and people forget, and sometimes I even forget how young he really was. You know, this was not like Tupac, you know, was 35, 40 years old. You know, this man was 20 years old when he really got on his career. You know, when he did Brenda's Got a Baby, which is such a prolific song, I think he was 20 years old.
Yes, and I look at the discipline and the logic that he had, and that was instilled in him from the Panthers. He was very analytical also. You look back and you look at his work and you look at him as a person, and it goes into the teachings from his mother. And it's so apropos that you look at it, and he was carried by his mother in prison. He wasn't born in prison, but he was carried by his mother in prison. And one of the things that's so striking about it, his mother, she wasn't a lawyer. She didn't have college degrees, but she managed to win a federal case against the federal government who was trying to imprison her for 40 plus years. She won that case without a lawyer, on her own, with that logic, the intellect, the analytical abilities, the same that she taught her son. And her son, from a young age, was taught to analyze. And once you're into problem solving, you can go a long way. And he did. You think about the fact that she would have him read the New York Times, she would have him read scholarly books, and then she would debate him about what he had read. So it's not just, okay, I read it, I understand. No, you're gonna show me you understand it, because if you can debate about it and give me valid explanations as to what's really going on in what you read, then I know you know it.
Right. You retained it. Right.
Yeah, that's his mother. And his mother put that in him, which she obtained from the Panthers. So I think that he had so much going for him that people don't understand. But one thing that will always hurt you, no matter how smart you are, is your environment. And you look at the fact that Tupac lived in some of the worst places that an individual could be. I mean, in New York City, and the parts of New York City he was in were very bad. Baltimore, the part of Baltimore he was in was very bad. Oakland, the part of California he was in was very bad. And it was like he had to survive that. He had to survive that, and he did. But that increased his knowledge base even more.
Right.
When you're book smart and you're street smart, that's a dangerous individual, and that's what Pac was.
Yep. Yeah. Like you said, the environment is such a big thing, and that's why they say they call it a trap, because like it's hard to get out. It's like you're stuck there, and it's like, when people say I'm a product of my environment, and they do tests on rats and mazes and different things like that. And the project, that's what it is. It's a project. Jay-Z said that, right? And so seeing him come out of that, make that, and at the time, like you said, not only, and we look at this thing called post-traumatic stress, and they talk about post-traumatic slave syndrome and the trauma that was passed down from our ancestors from slavery down. And imagine that trauma, and then the trauma of, again, you weren't born in prison, but the stress that your mom had in prison and dealing with the stuff, that you're there for that. You can't intellectually figure out what's going on, but you're there for that. And then you grow up as a child in these rough environments, right? And you deal with that. And then your mom, because of her trauma and her issues, she ends up getting on drugs. I think she was on crack, right? She was a crack fiend. And to deal with your mom doing that, and feeling the embarrassment and feeling sad and feeling angry and all these emotions that you have, but dealing with the streets and trying to survive and trying to get good grades and all that stuff like that. And, he was pursuing his love to be an actor. And, she moves him out west, almost reminds me of like Fresh Prince, it's like, sends him out. So she sends him out west, and, he meets Digital Underground, another classic hip hop group, and he's a dancer at first, and he's a roadie, and he's getting their bags and different stuff like that, and then his time comes, and he shines, he shines, and he gives us these, his first album was I believe Tupacalypse, and and he's talking about police brutality, and he's talking about he's got this one song where he's literally saying F you to every police department that he could think of in Cali.
But the way that he said it, he was eloquent with it.
Right.
It was nothing crude about it. He was eloquent with it, to the fact that, hey, this guy was so intellectually gifted that people just don't understand.
Right.
And it's like, I watch him as a young man, and I'm amazed at how he was able to reason, how he was able to communicate. And it served him well. I think for a long time, he still had the Panther protection mode in him. I remember when he first started to get famous, he was in Atlanta, and he shot a police officer. And I was when I heard it, I was like, man, that guy's gonna be in jail for life, man. I didn't know the facts. I just knew he shot a police officer.
Right.
So growing up in America, to me, you don't have to know the facts. If he shot a police officer, it don't matter. He's still going to jail.
He shot two.
Yeah. And it made it so bad, because I didn't realize until I watched the documentary about his life that those two guys were not acting as police officers. They were not. They were somewhere they weren't supposed to be, doing something they weren't supposed to be doing, and that acting under the color of law, authority, and being a thug at the same time is what got them shot. That's what got them shot.
Right.
I mean, if you pull a gun on me, yeah, I'm gonna shoot too.
Right.
You know, if I got one, I'm gonna shoot too. I'm not gonna stand there and wait for you to shoot me.
Right.
Especially you don't have any identification on them, and you haven't identified yourself at all. So you know, all of that came out, and he was exonerated in the end because of those facts. So you know, he was. But you think about how it transpired in the first place. Here it is. He's rolling down the street, and he sees two guys, and they're accosting a black man by himself, and they're roughing this guy up, you know. So he stops to help the guy. Didn't matter if you knew him or not. But see, that's Tupac.
Yeah.
Didn't matter if I knew you or not. I see an injustice. So since I see this injustice, it's incumbent upon me to act to try to stop this injustice.
Right.
And that's what he was doing. That's another thing that cleared him. People could relate to that fact that hey, he was being a good citizen.
Right.
He stopped to stop these people from hurting this man. So you know, all of that came out in the wash. But you know, what you see later on is a different type of Tupac, and we'll get into that in a different segment. But I don't think his heart was different. I think his environment was different to the point where he had to change the way that he carried himself in order to survive in that environment.
Right.
Because when you look at him, he was always looking after others. Once he got on, that man was taking care of 40 people. He didn't have to do that. You know, a lot of people, they get some money, they get some fame, and they're ghosts. But he wasn't.
Yeah. He's, like I said, he was taking care of all those people, and then, you know, he was a voice for the community, and you know, he ended up getting shot and getting robbed or whatever at a studio, and you know, of course that you know, that with the rape charges, which it wasn't even rape, he was an accessory supposedly, but the guy that Haitian Jack that you know actually did it or whatever was free, and he had a bunch of other charges that he beat and stuff as well. So I mean, we know what that tells you, but you know, the fact that he, you know, Tupac was like, where are they at? Where I'm, you know,
I'm the one who wasn't there.
Exactly.
I'm the one who was in a different room.
Right, exactly. Why are they not here answering these questions? And you got me, but we know what that was about. And so, you know, it was a setup in many ways. And so, you know, him and Biggie's situation, because he had mentored Biggie to some degree and was a friend to him. And I think what happened is, you know, whether you want to say the government or the record labels or whoever in those camps, you know, there was some type of plan to divide and conquer, you know, and so, you know, split that up. And so, you know, Pac gets shot, and he, you know, I can't imagine all the things that he's thinking, you know, the lack of distrust and like, man, you know, I got shot and I'm for the people, you know, and he gets shot and then thinking, you know, I don't think he thinks Biggie actually told people to go shoot him or something like that, but I think he looked at it as disloyal. It's like, yo, this is your city, this is your area, like, you could get stuff handled, you can get answers, like, you know what I'm saying? And supposedly he's, you know, at least from Pac's words, that he wasn't contacted by them or none. So in his mind, it was like, this is musical war. Like, I'm gonna destroy you. Like, I'm not trying to come and kill you physically, but every chance I get, your record label, like, I'm shutting y'all down. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna make it personal. And because you allowed this to happen to me, I'm gonna allow this to happen to you. And so I think, you know, it was that mindset, just like they did with, that was Huey Newton and who was the guy? It wasn't Bobby,
No, it wasn't Bobby. I can't recall his name right now.
Yeah.
I can picture it vividly.
but they had them,
Because he wound up moving to Cuba.
right, they had them going at it and stuff, and jealousy and things like that, and when you could just be working together and having that unity, right, striving for unity. So, you know, seeing that happen to him, and then, you know, he made a very as intelligent and as intellectual as he was, you know, he made a very ignorant assessment, thinking that, well, because I'm for the people, he thought he was so much for the people that nobody black would do that to him. It's like, bro, you gotta learn from history. Like, if they did it to Martin and Malcolm, and you know what I'm saying, if they did it to all these other people, if they did it to Frederick Douglass, and you know, you had the house Negroes snitching on, you know, all these different people, in some type of form or fashion, then they'll do the same to you. Right?
Absolutely.
So,
It's not going to be safe for you to just circulate out there like that and think that everybody's gonna say, hey, that's Tupac.
Right.
He's okay, you know.
Yeah, he should have had security with him, you know, he should have, you know, and you know, so that's an unfortunate thing. But even in that, I remember Dear Mama, and even as a child, you know, me and my mom, we've as a child, man, you know, a lot of that is because of her trauma, and then me growing up with my own issues and things like that, and not being able to really understand each other. And so there was issues there, but I remember even hearing that song and like appreciating my mom, you know what I'm saying? Even at the age, I think at the time I might have been like 9-10 years old or something when that song came out. But I remember it was a song that made you look at your own mom and be like, man, like, you know, that's the anthem. It felt like Pac was speaking for you. And also my auntie, her mother was we got a call, I think right around that time, that her mom, my auntie's mom was stabbed to death. My auntie and my mom have the same dad, and so her biological mother was stabbed to death right around that time. So that song always brought me like a lot of joy and a lot of sadness, because I remember that phone call and I remember my auntie when that stuff happened. So around that time. So, but you know, Pac had a way of like, and that's why his music today, even 25, 30 years later, you know, they're making a documentary and their music is coming out and things like that. His name is being mentioned because it was deeper than just, yes, this guy is talented, but his biggest talent outside of, you know, obviously music and acting was the ability to connect.
Yeah.
To, no matter who you were, race, creed, you know, whatever, background, old, young, black, white, whatever, he would make songs that you were just like, man, I really understand this, you know what I'm saying? On some level, you don't have to come from the streets, but it's just like he's making certain songs and he's saying, you know, his vocabulary was different, like you said, because he was educated in such a way. And, you know, the words, he was using words that rappers weren't using, the way he was using it. And it was just a beautiful thing. I know even to this day, man, I have a playlist of so many positive songs that he did. And we know there was, you know, he did the foolish stuff too. He did, you know, the rah-rah and stuff like that. And he had, you know, different sides to him. And, you know, I always tell people, you know, if you imagine being young, you know, in your 20s or when we were in our 20s, and you have not only having millions of dollars to access, you know, but cameras everywhere, especially now today with social media, what would your life look like, right? You might have ups and downs, highs and lows too, because that's the human experience, and it's on steroids because it's on camera, right? So there was nobody, the Black Panthers couldn't prepare him for that.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
And his anxiety level had to be extremely high with all the things that he was dealing with. So.
Getting drunk, getting high, trying to escape the pain, and dealing with stuff, and then when you're falsely accused of rape and the world thinks you're that, and you know you just went through a case of shooting officers and you barely beat that, and then you get shot. It's a lot of things. You heard, you know, even on the documentary, he talked a lot. One thing that stood out to me, he talked about how he used rap as like, I don't remember exactly how he said it. It wasn't like fighting the demons, but it was like almost like a form of therapy. But he had to express his thoughts, like get his thoughts out. But you hear a lot about, like, he talks about fantasies of death and enemies coming into sleep, and you know that these are the things that Malcolm X and you know, and Martin and other people have talked about. So it's like, but he made songs about that. So for that to be on his mind and still be able to show up and record all these songs, still look out for other people, like you said, take care of 40 people, that's a lot on any person, especially a 23, 24, 25-year-old.
I think that was therapy for him. I think the music was more therapy than anything else.
Right.
And looking at his life back then, he did some very good things. And like you say, he did some things that were not so good. But I think he was under so much pressure that to not have a mentor, it would be extremely hard for anybody to handle that kind of pressure. But I like the connection part, because you look at him and you would think, okay, how did this guy become friends with Mike Tyson? You know what I mean? Two totally different personalities, right? Like Mike said, Mike said, I thrive in a crime environment. You know what I mean? I thrive in that environment.
He was a killer.
And you look at Pac, that wasn't Pac. That's not his type of environment.
Right.
But then he can turn around once again and bond with somebody like Snoop Dogg. Now back then, I love Snoop's work, by the way, but back then Snoop was a gangster for real. A lot of people nowadays, they crack me up. These rappers who want to tell people they this and tell people they that, they ain't from that life.
Right.
You know, that's a way for them to increase revenue. Try to get that street cred.
Right.
But Snoop was from that life.
Right.
You know what I mean? And for him and Tupac to bond, you know, because Tupac, think about the discipline, and the Panthers were not about crime. They're the opposite of it. So for you to still be able to bond with someone the way he did, that just says a lot about him as a person.
He was uniting, you know, Bloods and Crips.
Yeah.
You know, he was walking into different neighborhoods and they all showed love and respect, and they're like, oh man, it's Pac. And he wasn't from Cali.
No.
You know, he was from the East Coast and grew up most of his life in New York and Baltimore. But he was adopted by the West Coast. Like they took him in. He was able to come in and rap and name the cities and the places and get that respect and learn the lingo. And even if you listen to a lot of his music, his later years, especially on Death Row, you hear like the influence of like Daz Dillinger, and then which was Snoop's cousin. You hear like that style. He embraced it and made it his own, or perfected it, or whatever you want to call it. And so, like you said, just the ability to connect with everybody on every level. You know, the Jimmy Iovine's, the Dre's, you know, at the time until they fell out, the Snoops, and you know, so many people. Madonna. I mean, you know, they talked about when he was in prison, and you know, Mike Tyson came to see him, and Madonna, and Tony Danza, and you know what I'm saying? Like he was, you know, I forgot the white guy's name, but you know, it was just it was all around. You know what I'm saying? He had people from every walk of life. And then remember when he got shot the first time, Jasmine Guy, remember? Yeah. You find out that he was a close friend with her, and they met on the Different World set when he got on there because of Jada, because of their relationship. And he was basically staying at Jasmine Guy's house. He checked out the hospital, and him and Outlaws were staying over there hiding out, right? Yeah. And so you just see, man, the connections, the charm, the charisma that he had. You see the acting level that he had, the Shakespearean knowledge that he had. It was just such a beautiful thing, and it was unfortunately it was cut short. But like you said, just that's why it's so important to have that environment. And as you get, you know, life doesn't care if you're 25 or 55, you know. And so if you lack wisdom in certain areas, it can get you. And so when you are getting money like that, you know, I think even the scriptures say, the Bible and other proverbs say, you know, a foolish man and his money will depart, or you know what I'm saying?
Be parted.
Yeah, so parted. So things like that. And so like when you are making money like that, you have to move different. You know, you have to, you know, you're you know, it's a dangerous thing for you to go places and everybody knows who you are, but you don't know who they are. You don't know who likes you, who dislikes you, but they can identify you and you can't identify them. And so you have to be able to up your level of security. You have to be able to move different. There are certain things that you can't, you know, that you can't do, which we'll talk about soon. But that takes people around you that care enough. I mean, we see the situation now with Ja Morant in basketball, the NBA, and it's like, man, like, you know, he gets, and it's not like he committed a crime. No. But it's just like, bro, like you're playing for the National Basketball Association. You're making millions of dollars. These people are not going to play that. And you're a young black man. They're a target. So they want to make you the face of the league, but then there's a lot of people that don't want to see that. So you got your homies and you're hanging out and waving guns and Instagram and stuff like that. It's not going to be perceived the same. Is it right? No. Just like, should I be able to walk in any neighborhood with a hoodie on, minding my business, listening to music, and shouldn't have to be harassed? Mm-hmm. That's how it should be, but it's not reality. So I can go out there and try to act like, well, it doesn't matter, but it does matter, because you have to live within not how things should be, but how things are, and protect yourself. And you can still aim for how it should be, but protect yourself. And so Ja Morant, those type of people, you have to protect you are the investment, you are the asset, you know? And so I felt like Tupac with the same thing. It's like, I don't think enough people told him and let him know, like, yo, like, we need you. Excuse me, we can't have you acting like, you know, if you want somebody to be, you know, every camp they call, even coming from the people who come from the ghetto, no, they have like what they call a fall guy. You know, you have a guy that's like, hey, if I'm making all the money, if somebody's gonna get real crazy, it's gonna be him over there. He don't care about, you know, going to jail or he ain't got nothing to lose.
Yep.
So if anybody's gonna act crazy, it's gonna be him. I'm not about to mess up my bread and all the people I'm protecting to prove I'm gangster or whatever. And they have that even in sports. You have the enforcer guy.
Yep.
He don't mind getting ejected. You know,
It's his job, basically.
Yes, exactly.
It's his job.
Exactly. You saw the enforcers, the Bill Lambiers, Dennis Rodmans, whoever, Charles Oakley.
Yep.
Matt Barnes, whoever. They didn't mind being those guys that's like, hey, listen, if there's any scuffle, they gonna be in the Steven Jackson, they gonna be in the midst of it. It's not gonna go how you want it. So I think more people have to, just have that perspective, man. So I really, really appreciate of his whole career, especially pre-death row, and things like that. And then, so I guess we can get to that point.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to add before we go there is that I remember in the early 80s, I was stationed at Fort Knox, and I had a buddy from East St. Louis, Illinois. We called him Bear. I'm not going to say his real name because he might not want it out there, but I love you, Bear. I had a buddy named Bear and another buddy from Cleveland named Tip, and they sent the three of us to California, TDY, on a Marine Corps base. And we stayed there for the better part of a year. We were there about 10 months.
Wow.
But Bear had people in Watts, So we rent a car. If we had enough time on the weekend, we got a 3-long weekend, we rent a car, drive down to Watts, and his people always took care of us. They showed us a good time.
Yeah.
But one of the things they did was they made us safe. And for me, I was really, really thankful because it was new to me. Coming from Western New York, I seen a lot.
Right.
But the lifestyle in Cali was totally different.
Right.
And I didn't realize that until after I started observing what was going on around me.
Right.
Because they were serious. I remember I had some clothes on. I was wearing some blue jeans and a blue shirt, and they was like, nah, man. And they made me change clothes.
Right.
And I was like, what do you? And they explained it to me.
Yeah,
So,
right.
and then when I got out and I started seeing, I was like, okay, I understand.
Hello, everyone. This is Sandra Jones, co-founder of Community Podcasts. I'd like to say thank you to all our listeners and viewers. We're asking for positive vibes only. Thank you and have a great day.